Hey guys, good morning. Today's lesson is for Tuesday the 12th, and I hope you guys enjoyed our Zoom meeting yesterday, especially the scavenger hunt. I know I did. And we're going to jump right into just reviewing things that we looked at the beginning of the year in foundations, and that I know that either we need to spend just a little more time on it, or it's just a good idea for us to review. So one of the big things that we want to look at are base words and suffixes. Remember, suffixes go at the end of a word, and they often change the meaning of a word or how the word is used. So for example, we're going to talk about a suffix that makes a word plural, which means more than one. Not singular. Singular just means one. So two ways that we can make a word mean plural is by adding an S suffix or an ES suffix. Now for most of the words that you guys come across, you're simply going to add an S if you want to make it plural, okay? Easy words like cat, you add an S and that becomes cats. Or dogs, same thing. You add an S and it becomes dogs, plural, more than one. Okay? Two other examples we have up here. If we use what's called the base word or the root word map, we would just look at M-A-P and we say, okay, if I have one map, it's simply map. If I add more maps to my pile, I'd want to add an S to the end of the word, making it maps. And when we're marking it up, we simply just underline the root word to show, hey, that's the root word or the base word without the suffix added to it. And then we just leave the suffix alone. When you're tapping at a word like maps, you only tap out the base word. You don't tap out the S or the ES. So for maps, you just do just leave the S alone. Same thing with rings. We know we have a glued sound in there. You would simply just add the S. You'd underline the base word to show that, hey, this is the word that we started with. Ring means one. Rings means two or more. So it went from singular, which is one, to plural, which is two or more, okay? Now, sometimes there are some words where S won't work. Sometimes we need to add ES, and that exception comes when we're dealing with a word that ends in an S, a CH, an SH, or an X. So for example, if you have the root word box, so you have one box, but then you get a few more from Amazon, now you have boxes. So BOX, since the word ends in an X, and S underneath. You hear that with that X, for the S sound, that X from the X, and then the S sound, boxes, would sound kind of weird. But boxes makes it a little different. It separates that ES sound from the X sound in the X. And the same thing with an S, and CH and SH. They all make that S sound or ch sound or sh sound. That sound is really similar to just an X, okay? To an S. So that's when you go ahead and add that ES. Well, if we're talking about math, I gotta be careful. My basement is literally covered in Lego. Eli and Quinn are having a Lego building competition with some of their friends in Cincinnati. So Eli's been building the Lego Death Star, which is pretty big, but he's left quite a mess here. So I'm just trying not to trip and break my leg. So anyway, if we're talking about our shapes for math, at this time, we'd be jumping into our test. We'd be reviewing for our test, and then we'd be taking our test tomorrow. But if we were reviewing for our test, one of the things we would do is we would talk about 2D shapes. And so one of the 2D shapes we would talk about is a cube. Now, I had a cube and it's gone, but I'm gonna grab this Lego, so that works out pretty well. So I'm gonna come up really close and try not to hurt myself coming over. Okay, so when we're talking about our cube here, we would need to describe some of its characteristics that you'd see physically. And one thing is the faces. Now the faces are those flat surfaces, or in this case, where you have a couple studs. So how many faces does a cube have? Well, we would go and we'd say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So a cube has 6 faces, and the same thing with a rectangular prism, which is just something that looks like a cereal box or a tissue box. And then how many vertices? Now the vertices are those parts where the faces and the edges come together to make those sharp points. So how many vertices? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have 6 faces, 8 vertices. Now, if we're talking about the edges are those lines where the faces come together. Not the vertices, not those sharp points, but those lines between. So how many edges do we have? Well, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we flip over here. 9, 10, 11, 12. So we have 6 faces, 8 vertices, and 12 edges. And then the big thing is now, unfortunately, this Lego is not a true cube, but it's pretty close. So what are the shape of the faces, these flat surfaces? Well, the shape of a true cube would all be squares. All around, we should see squares for our faces. So that's just one big thing we need to work on, especially for next year, because you're going to see these 3D shapes again. Well, we finished yesterday the digestive system, and it was pretty fascinating. We talked about words like nutrition, and we know nutrition is when we use food to nourish our body. What does nourish mean? Nourish means to take in food and to feed our body, to fuel our body, to help our body grow by taking in that food and that water or those liquids. And we know that this book was an informational text. We know it's an informational text because it's telling us information about a specific topic we are either interested about or we need to learn about. Well, the book that we're going to look at today is a lot different. This book is called Stone Soup. Now, if you compare the two, this one's pretty obvious by looking at the cover that it's an informational book. We figured out that if it's an informational text or book, it's generally a picture on the front that's probably either one of the topics that we're talking about in the book. Like in this case, it talks about that it shows a digestive system and it's a picture made by computer animation, or it's a photograph of something real, like we're learning about dogs and there's a picture of the dog in the cover. We also found out, not always, but generally, if the picture on the cover is a drawing or a painting, it often is a fiction book. It is a book that we read either for pleasure or something we want to read about to enjoy hearing. Well, this is a fictional book, and it's kind of a hybrid. It's in some ways a historical fiction in some ways because it does talk about a certain time period, and it's also it's an old French tale. So, okay, I need to pause for just a second.